Yeah, of course.
Right.
Hey, Ma.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it when people's phones
Hey,
ring.
Mom, can you say something about us?
Oh, don't say that.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Alexander with American Songwriter. We're located at Starstruck Studios here in Nashville on Music Row. Catching up with Joey and Dave, you know them as the brothers Landreth. Welcome, you guys. Good to see you.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So let's talk about Nashville. You guys have been here a bunch, huh?
Yeah, we've spent a fair amount of time here over the years. Yeah, it's definitely has a second home kind of vibe. We got a lot of friends here.
It's been a while since you've been here, so I'm sure you're happy to be back and back on the road again.
Yeah, absolutely. Last time we were here was 2019, fall of 2019.
Wow.
So nice to catch up with, like Joy said, nice to catch up with some old friends and get to some old haunts. We hit our favorite coffee shop, and we're gonna do Martin's Barbecue this afternoon.
You have to do barbecue, right, when you're in Nashville.
You can't miss it.
Let's talk about the album, of course. It's emotive, it's ethereal, it's very emotional. And even though it's about relationships ending, I feel like it's very optimistic overall. Was that intentional?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily intentional, but we tend to write from a very personal place most of the time, with very rare exception. And the last 2 years has been a really great time for us to individually on our own to do a lot of reflecting and working on our own sort of mental health. And we've found ourselves in this place where we were really exploring closure and healing and moving forward from trauma and grief and the loss of relationships, and really kind of leaning into the adult side of some of those feelings and what it means to lose people and move on. And what we've kind of found in this process of exploring this stuff is that despite there being, you know, some complicated feelings and some dramatic feelings, it's a really joyful experience. You get out on the other end of some of these tough things and tough topics, and you're a few steps ahead than you were before. So that's kind of what this record represents for us.
When we talk about being a songwriter, I've heard you say this in interviews where you said you have to write about what you know. There's a vulnerability that comes through. Is it hard to kind of let those walls down, or is it because you're brothers that there's just a comfort level?
Yes and no. I mean, Dave and I are incredibly close. We're safe to say he's my best friend. I don't know if he'd say the same about me.
I like you a lot. No, we
I need a break.
Best friends since we're just little kids.
Yeah, so we are intensely comfortable with one another. There are definitely some moments on this record that were harder, like, you know, Stay was a tough tune to write. Corduroy was a tough tune to write. Shame, I didn't really have much to do with, but I think was a tough song to write. But we do feel safe with one another. So it's like, you're always, for me, I'm always gonna be uncomfortable broaching tough topics, but I always feel safe to bring them to him. Even on my solo records, Dave always would go through everything. Even songs that he had nothing to do with writing-wise, I would just say, what do you think of this? Let me know if, is there anything grammatically incorrect that I'm gonna be embarrassed about later? He reads more than I do, so. The collaboration is pretty integral to anything, certainly that I do. Dave is involved in virtually everything.
I will add to that, like, Joey will not sing songs that he doesn't believe in. And I've watched that enough. We've collectively have experienced that. Like, if we try to put something into a piece of music that we can't stand behind, it tastes bad in your mouth. And we get up on stage, we try and play those songs, and they always hit the cutting room floor.
People are always like, it'd be great if you guys had a hit. I'm like, yep.
Sure would be.
Sure would. Would love to have me a hit, but we haven't written one, and there's always a couple songs where you go, oh, this could be good. And you get up on stage, and you go, ugh. Yeah. You know, and it's not that I wouldn't love to have a hit. We just haven't had something that felt genuine. That it's just like, yeah, this is the song I want to stand behind every single night for the next 15, 20 years.
It's got to be.
Happened yet.
It's got to be a truth. It has to have honesty and integrity for us to get up on stage and perform it. Otherwise, we just can't. So we kind of, we police ourselves that way.
It's got to be organic, and it can't be forced. I think that two guys right here that are not thinking of radio when you write.
We go into the studio to make things that resonate with us, that feel good, that feel right. And we've been doing it long enough now that we found a legion of people that also agree with us, and we trust that if we stick to our guns and make the stuff that really means something to us, that there's a bunch of people out there that want to hear it too.
You mentioned Shame, and it's a song that really stood out to me on this album. And my perception, and obviously it's a listener, perception when you hear a song. It sounds like the guy is confronting himself, his own problems, his own mistakes. It's
so interesting you say that. It just dawned on me this week. Again, talking about what these songs are about. I wrote that song about a relationship, about a difficult relationship that was coming to an end. And it was really hard to put that one down and sort of make peace with some of those feelings. The song is a very loving song in that it's about somebody that I care about an awful lot, that this relationship dissolved. But in going back and listening to it and looking at the real lyrics, I had the realization that it's, and this is so common, the things that we're so critical about in others are the things that we are critical about in ourselves. And I looked at the lyrics, I saw them written somewhere just in passing, and I sort of looked at it as a whole and realized this song it's not about this person, it's about me. It's about the reflection that I see in my own self. It's about my struggle with sobriety, my desire to be better and falling short, and the shame that I feel. And that was a heavy realization, and it caught me off guard because I thought I was writing it about somebody else, but I wasn't. It was, and it's funny because I think people are hearing it that way, and I didn't. Like when I put it down on paper, it's like, no, this is not about me. This is not about me. And I look at the lyrics, I'm like, this is my story, and I just like, whoa, geez. So I think I'm still coming to terms with that, honestly. But
I was going to ask that when you have this very emotional content, when you're on stage and you're performing these night after night, do you have to step aside a little bit and kind of play a character on stage to not be so, let it grab your heart?
I would certainly understand why someone might step into a character, especially if they're dealing with stuff that's tough to talk about. But for me, there's an incredible catharsis that happens when reliving some of these things, and I just love to share that with people at shows. And I think when I go to see someone, or I watch a video of someone and I see that the real person, it just makes me love them and the music all the more. And for me, making music and writing songs and making art is all about just sharing a little piece of my humanity with folks. And so it's really important for me to be as real as I can be. And sometimes it's tough, but it's always a beautiful thing that you can share with people. And we've spent a lot of time as a society trying to pretend that we're okay when we're not. And I want to be a spokesperson for it's okay to not be okay. And that's kind of what we try to lead with, I think, in how we present ourselves with this music is, hey, this is who we are. And some of it is sad, some of it is very joyful. And it's all this is just you're getting a 90-minute view of our humanity. If we're doing our job well that night,
I want to go back to the production because I think sometimes, in many cases, the production drives the vibe or the feeling. I love the guitar. I love when you play minor chords. Woo, I am all about it. But Don't Feel Like Crying is one of those songs, and there's this dark, moody vibe. And if I could pull out a lyric, the ones that burn brightest don't burn as long. They end up in a song. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that song is about a friend that I lost really suddenly, and it's pretty literal. It's just about feeling that loss so viscerally, and I mourned so hard that it really surprised me. It took my breath away. It was something I was just not ready for. You're never ready to lose someone you love. But that song was just, it was really an outpouring of what that felt like for me directly. And yeah, some songs are hard to write. I mean, that song, when we started working on that song, was a completely different thing. And then this sort of event occurred, and all of a sudden we were struggling to finish it, and then all of a sudden we had our why. It was like, oh, I know what to do with this music now. I know where I can put it. I know which story I can tell, and I know which wound I can start to heal with this song. And it's a great example of standing behind that song every night, just it's like one little gentle suture at a time. Yeah, that one means a lot.
When you write a song like that, do you write as you're playing? Are you mostly on guitar? Because I feel like the production and those minor chords and that guitar solo, it just feels a part of that lyric.
Yeah, that one came together on guitar. There's a couple of things that happened. I played keys instead, but mostly, I write mostly from, we write mostly from guitars.
You know, I mentioned Bonnie Raitt, of course, covering your music. There's a song on here, and I don't know, you don't know me. It almost sounds a little Lyle Lovett-ish. I feel like Lyle could probably record that song. Is he an influence on you guys at all?
Huge.
Really? Wow.
Huge.
Lyle, if you see this, we'd love it.
Anything that we've written, it's all yours.
It's all yours, buddy.
Huge Lyle Lovett fan. Lyle Lovett, John Hyatt, Ry Cooder, Bonnie Raitt. That's kind of like, am I missing any? Lil George. That's like 5 artists that have had the most impact on us as musicians. And Lyle Lovett's Pontiac was just such an important record for us coming up. These records were records that were on our stereo at full blast from as long as I could remember in permanent rotation. And then in our adulthood, we carried through and have become really important records to us too. And our kids will now hear. But yeah, big influence.
Keith Urban, as I name drop, but Keith Urban had said in an interview that all of his heroes, that basically he is a collection of all of his heroes.
Yeah.
Do you feel that?
I mean, my version of that is I like to say that my music is just bad impressions of my favorite musicians. But that collection of imitation is the sound that we make. And, you know, I could not possibly identify more with a statement than that one. It's very, very true. And I think in your younger years as an artist, you're nervous about. You don't want people to be able to pick out your influences. And now we proudly wave those flags. As
you're younger, it is straight up imitation. You get up on stage and you play, okay, here's my Stevie Ray Vaughan lick. Mm-hmm. Here's my Jimmy Vaughan lick. You know, here's my Pino Palladino impression on the bass or whatever. I'm gonna write songs that sound like my heroes. But as you get older, they work their way into your marrow, mm-hmm. and they become much deeper, and they come out as this amalgamation, and it's a little more honest. And somewhere in there, your own voice appears. But it's through that imitation that I think most artists discover their own real sort of unique identity. Yeah, we're really proud of our influences. I got no shame. None.
The evolution, and speaking to that, same reason today why you started playing music all those years ago. Is it still as enjoyable? Is it still really?
I think even more so now than when we were younger. When we were younger, certainly I can't speak for you, but you're a little more focused on what other people are thinking and potential cool opportunities that are floating around. And I think largely in part for me due to the arrival of my daughter, where she just changed my whole list of why I exist. And I think because she's more important to me than anything else, being her dad and being as good a dad to her as I can be, I'm actually able to enjoy our work so much more. And I'm way less concerned with the things that exist on the periphery. And instead of being worried about leaving a good impression, I just want to have fun with my friends on stage at shows. And instead of wanting to make a record that more people are going to love, I just want something that when my daughter is grown, she can go, hey, this is who my dad is. You can tell who he is by the music that he makes. And so absolutely, without hesitation, I can say I'm enjoying it more than ever.
Same, Dave?
Yeah, for a whole host of reasons. The why changes, And I think that's a question you're constantly answering, and you're having to reassess. You have to reassess, because the reason that you do things in your 20s, in your 30s, the reasons I will do things in my 40s are going to be so much different. The things that propel us and the relationships you have. But I can say very confidently that for sure this is the most fun we're having as the band. We've done so much work to get rid of the things that drag on your ego and the baggage that we carry, or learn to cope with them and develop healthy strategies for managing them, that with that stuff out of the way, or at least in check, we're able to have so much more fun. And musically, we're having so much more fun. We're being so much more free. We're playing better than we ever had. We're singing better than we ever have. Yeah, it's a riot. It's a good time.
How great is it to be on this journey as brothers?
It's the best.
Yeah, it's pretty special.
I have the unique perspective of going out there without Dave. And I've done a lot of good work on my own and left behind some music and performances that I'm so proud of, and that mean very important things to me. But there's nothing that beats sharing this with Dave.
Being in the studio, the honesty that comes. Sometimes brothers, I can't imagine working with my brother. It can be a little brutally honest, right?
Yeah.
It could get heated.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, we scrap like brothers for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it can be uncomfortable sometimes for other people, but it's just because we're so direct, or we can be so direct when we need to be, when the heat's on. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's special. I mean, Joey had the perspective of going on the road without me. Right. I had the perspective of staying home and trying to imagine a life without it, or try to build a life without it, and wasn't able to, meaningfully in a healthy way. Like, it's really important. This thing that we do together, it's a really important part of who we are. Yeah, and I look at my friends, because it's a weird gig, doing this artist thing. It's a strange gig. The pressure is strange. The world is bizarre. And when we talk to our friends who are doing this on their own, I always feel this sense of loneliness in what they do, and isolation. And when I think about the fact that we get to do this together, that we get to sit together at the end of the night and commiserate and share these experiences, that we're not isolated in it, right, that we can move through it together. It's so lucky. We're so lucky.
Share the wins and share the losses.
Yep, totally.
And do it independently. There's something to be said about it. In this day and age, the way people get music now, you guys have your own record label, Birthday Cake. By the way, who wouldn't want Birthday Cake?
That's the whole thing. You nailed it. Everybody always asks, why'd you call it that? Because
everybody likes birthday cake. Unless you got like a flour intolerance or something.
Yeah, which then I'm sorry, then
sorry,
I don't know.
not for you. Gluten-free.
Gluten-free flapjacks.
Yeah, it is special. We are the architects of our career in a lot of ways, and we have our hands on the levers. But more importantly, we have built a team around us of people who are like-minded misfits, and in the industry, and we're just excited to build them into rock stars on their own, as we are to build up the artists that we sign to the label and stuff like that. But it's so fun. We get a chance to do it differently, and everything that we do with the label and the management, the publishing company, has to pass this test of like, would I feel good about this deal or this interaction as an artist? And if it doesn't, we just don't do it. We do things differently, and we really do put the artist's perspective and needs first, because how could I ever reconcile that discrepancy after what we've been through as artists if I was going to turn around and hose somebody or treat them poorly or take advantage or exploit? It's never going to happen.
Advice for artists, songwriters watching right now, here, watching us on American Songwriter. What could you say to somebody who's like, man, I just got to do it. I got to be out there.
The advice that I wish that somebody had given me back in the day was, don't be afraid to take a break. Because we live in this industry where everybody is always going, you have to push. And we did that, and it almost ruined our career. And I think balance is wildly important. I had a friend give me advice one day. He's a brilliant filmmaker from India. Very random story as to why and how we met. But he said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Not great. I'm trying to write for this record, and I haven't written a single thing." He said, "Walk me through your process." So I wake up every morning, make coffee for my wife. She goes to school, and I sit at home in front of my computer, and I work for 8, 10, 12 hours trying to write a song, and nothing comes out. And he's like, "I think that's your problem. What, are you going out? Are you leaving your apartment? Are you going and experiencing life? Are you watching other people be humans? Are you interacting with other people? If the answer is no, how could you possibly write something that feels honest and like a reflection of the experience you're having if you're not having any experience other than sitting at your computer feeling bad about what you're not doing? And that just blew my brain all the way open, and I started to spend a little more time outside and riding my bike and going and visiting friends and trying to live my human life, and lo and behold, songs started to come out and inspiration started to hit. And I think skill and artistry are not necessarily something that has to go hand in hand. And we spend all this time building skill and expecting that if we get to a certain skill level that we're going to be able to make art, and art exists completely outside your skill set. It's good to have to build your skills and be a great musician, be a great singer, have great access to language, but the things that makes a song great are not being good at guitar, are not being a good singer. It's about being able to access humanity. And so I think you have to do that through having balance. So if you feel like you need to take a break, take one.
Ditto. I couldn't have said it better myself, and I would absolutely stand behind that. Find some balance in your life, or seek out other things that will help make you really good at what you do. Because if you put everything you have into this and you don't do anything else, you won't develop friendships. You won't leave room for important relationships. I am now a better bass player, singer, songwriter, musician, artist, because I'm a good dad. Like, I draw so much from having that meaning in my life, and it takes so much pressure off of this. I'm a dad. That is my raison d'etre. And then suddenly music can just be this thing that I do that is fun. It gives me all this extra energy, and I love. And it doesn't have to be absolutely everything. It's just wonderful. It takes so much pressure off.
So making this album, like I said, everybody wants to move on for the pandemic, but literally that's how you made this album. You guys, you were in the studio, there was a little bit of solitude, and I would think that kind of really also not only causing the reflection and the time that you had, but the creative process. A lot of people felt they got so creative during that time.
The beginning of the pandemic, I remember watching everybody go deep into creator mode, and I didn't feel that at all. Wow. I really felt like this is my time to take some time off. And so I really enjoyed my PlayStation quite a lot for the first little bit, and definitely stayed up too late playing zombie video games. But once Dave and I started throwing around the idea of making a new record, we kind of went into it thinking that we were going to make this record the same way that we've made most all the other records we've made, both under the Brothers Landreth name and also under my name. Handful of musicians in a room, everybody's making eye contact, everybody's responding to each other, and with the restrictions that were in place in Manitoba, we couldn't do that. And so we had to pivot from our sort of first and very important comfort zone of playing like a band. And it pushed us in a really, really cool direction. I can safely say we learned things from making this record in that way that we'll take into every record we make from here on forward. So it was, it's hard to say that it was a great time, because it wasn't. It was really devastating for some people. It was really a really challenging time. But there were some invaluable lessons learned during that time that I'll forever be grateful for. So it's a cool record to make. We're intensely proud of this one.
Yeah. Dave, for you, talk about the challenges. I mean, you're having musicians having to email tracks and you're going back and forth. I would think that just, like you said, takes it out of your comfort zone and just a different aspect.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I was really reluctant initially, like when we first set up, so the pandemic hits, we decide we're going to make a record, after the PlayStation phase is over. We decide we're going to make a record. And so we start writing for it, and we get the songs together, and we have enough songs that we're ready to go into the studio. There was a lull in the restrictions in Winnipeg where we live, and we were able to get one session in with a drummer. So we brought a drummer in, and it was still kind of like it was strange in the studio because you're masked up and everybody's being cautious, and so it's still a little awkward. But we went into the first session thinking we would do it like we always did. And we did a weekend of tracking, and we got all the songs tracked, and we stopped and listened to them, and then we didn't get them. They weren't right. And
wow.
there's a bunch of reasons for that. It was, some of the pre-production stuff that we didn't set us up, but ultimately, for whatever reason, we just didn't get the tracks, so then we had to reset and prepare ourselves to go in and try and do it again, which is really difficult. I mean, it happens to a lot of artists and it happens on a lot of records, but the false start kind of rocked our confidence a little bit. And then the restrictions hit a lot harder, and suddenly we had to make a record inside of a bubble, at which point it was like, well, either we're going to stop and wait, but who knows for how long, or we're going to march forward. So we made the decision to start doing stuff remotely. Both of us, for various reasons, were just like really intensely uncomfortable with this idea, because our band has always been the sound of like a live band. That's kind of how we've thought of ourselves. And I think up until that point, how a lot of our fans see us too, is just like, we're a rock band. This is a thing we do. We play really well on stage, and we translate that into records. So making the decision to start doing that differently, and especially the rhythm section, because when we typically, prior to this, when we record, we build everything off of one inspired take. We go into the studio, we listen to the demos, which are just acoustic guitar and voice. We talk about them, and then we just go at it, and we get a couple of takes, and we stop once we got one that felt particularly inspired, and then we build from that. That's like the framework. And this time it was really different. It was about going into the studio every day and obsessing over little parts, which is not something that we did. That's really not sort of the way we had approached it. And it wound up developing this really orchestrated approach to making a record, which is I think why this record feels so differently, because every part was really, we really fought for it, and we were not afraid to strip everything back and start over again. So some of them, these different anchors appear. Sometimes it's a rhythm section track. Sometimes it's a lyric. Sometimes it's just a feeling. Like this song needs to feel a certain way. And everything needs to hang off of that. It really did put us in a different direction.
Do you feel then you're more intensely, right, looking at things, but, that way of approaching music that you go, we have to pull back. I think, remember why, I think a lot of artists, there's a love of music, and sometimes going, are we overthinking this?
Yeah, well, one of the things that came out of this record that was really, really fun was that because we were flying in drum tracks, we weren't in the room with the drummer. He would say, okay, guys, I'm gonna start working on the tune, 9 a.m. Central. I'll have something for you to listen to by 11. And you let me know what you think. And it, like, logistically was kind of a pain to send revisions and go, oh, maybe this hi-hat pattern. And because left to my own devices, I can burrow myself all the way down the rabbit hole on one little tiny detail. And I found myself really opening up to the idea of, well, I could do that here. I could say, let's get rid of that 16th note here, and let's change these accents like this, or I could just accept this, and as soon as we started to accept things that were coming in, then it was less about making a record exactly as we saw or we wanted it, and it became more about a collaborative experience. And as soon as I pulled myself out of the kitchen on some of these things, then really beautiful, magical things started to happen. And the record started to go in directions that it never would have gone in if I'd have been nitpicking over little details. And that's one of the lessons that we're going to take with us everywhere we go, is sometimes it's just a good thing for me to keep my mouth shut. I'm intensely grateful for that.
Another beautiful thing that happened prior to making this record, you both became fathers. So now you have your families. That has to impact who you are as an artist. That has to seep in. Not that we're going to hear any songs about diaper changing or anything on this album.
Not on this one.
This whole record is really just about diaper changes.
But did it seep in? Did you find that you kind of a different mindset as dads?
Yeah, definitely. My son was born January 2020, and we were supposed to go back on the road end of March 2020. So we had 3 months at home, my wife and I. And that was sort of our parental leave. And then we were going to hit the road again. And then the pandemic hit, and we wound up being 2.5 years at home. And then Joey had Joni in March of 2021, his daughter. Before having kids, so much of your identity gets wrapped up in this thing that we do. You know, you really do. You think of yourself as an artist or a bass player or a singer or a songwriter or whatever. And for I think I can safely speak for both of us that like once those kids came into the world, we're dads first now.
Yeah.
Everything else is secondary, and like that's my job. That's my most important gig, is being this kid's father. And so that changes everything. And I think, you know, there's some practical considerations. You know, suddenly it's really, really important to prioritize time at home and to balance our touring schedule so that we're at home as much as we need to be for our families. But it also suddenly puts the heat on, because everything that we do outside of our home and being with our kids takes away from that time. So when we're out here playing, it's got to matter. It's got to mean something. There's no time for messing around. Like if we're going to be out playing shows, we got to play the best shows of our lives. We're going to perform as well as we can, and we're going to make the most of it. And when we're making records and we're writing songs, suddenly there's just a lot more on the line. It just matters more somehow.
I don't know if the inspiration, you know, of having children was the catalyst for the song Stay, but it's certainly, I think when people listen to this knowing your background, that, oh my gosh, you know, there were so many people, when the pandemic hit, they go, do we have to leave? Do we have to go back outside? Yeah. But that song really addresses the fact that you want to be at home and you know, the road is calling, but there's a definite pull now. Talk about that song.
Yeah, well, I started writing that song before the pandemic. And it was kind of in a period where I really was starting to feel burnt out from being on the road. And my whole adult life, I mean, even, you know, I've been traveling as a musician since I was 15. And a massive part of my identity is wrapped up in being a touring musician. It's like, for most of my sort of grown-up life, that's how I see myself. And all of a sudden I was feeling like, you know, at the end of 2020, we were playing some of the best shows of our lives and selling out bigger rooms in Europe and doing all this really cool stuff. And I just kept feeling myself going, yeah, this is okay, I guess, but I would just love to unpack my bag.
Yeah.
And it was a hard song to write because I wasn't necessarily ready to say some of these things out loud, you know? It came out and I finished the song and played it for Dave, and we made a couple tweaks for it and wound up getting on the record. And the meaning of that song changed so drastically when my daughter was born, and it became less about feeling burnt out and not wanting to tour, and it became more about wanting to be able to be there and watch her become herself, and watch my wife be a mom, and just get to share in our family. So it's taken a few turns, and I think that's a beautiful thing with songwriting, is that even your own intent as a writer changes as you change. So that's kind of what it means for me now.
I have to address the production and all of the brothers Landreth music. You guys are so, I always say, you know, that production is almost reduction. You know, you just, you know, light-handed, and it's definitely accompanies the lyrics. They're definitely both in the spotlight. This song, Stay, towards the end, there's almost like this dreamlike sequence, and I love the modulation where you guys go up, and it really plays into this feeling of this longing. Speak to that and the intent in producing it that way.
Like the key changes, I'm really into key changes right now. and I'm a big music nerd, like music theory nerd, and some of the music that I really love to think about does not necessarily match the music that I like to make. So I like to find ways to stay within our musical idiom, but can sort of take us on little musical adventures. And when I kind of feel the pull to make decisions like that, the counter question is always, what purpose does this serve? And am I changing keys because I just want somebody to be like, oh, cool, key change? Or are we changing keys because we want to re-engage the listener emotionally? And that kind of, whenever there's a key change, it's because we all sort of decide collectively, yeah, okay, this works here.
Right.
And there are some key changes that got fired.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, what do you guys think of this? They're like, ooh.
I'm getting the feeling that Joey, that you're the one who's kind of going off, and Dave, you're the one that's kind of reining in the way you guys operate in the studio.
There's an ebb and flow, certainly.
Yeah.
And we push and pull each other I think, pretty equally. But what was really interesting with this record is that we really prioritized each other's creative process in terms of we're not going to move on from something until everyone in the room is satisfied, and it was sometimes challenging for me because I would have an idea that I really wanted, that I had firmly in my mind, and Dave and our producer Marie would go, I don't know, and you have to drop your ego and go, okay, well, if it's the majority of the room doesn't agree, then we try something new, and it went, everybody took their turn letting their ideas hit the cutting room floor, but we really did prioritize each other on this record. Not that we haven't in the past, but we did more so on this record. Yeah.
Dave, you're going to say something.
Yeah, the album is littered with these little victories from everybody, whether it's Murray, who really truly is like the third creative partner. He does not get enough spotlight for what he brings to our recording process. He's produced all the records except for Hindsight. Oh, Hindsight and All That You Dream.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but most of our records he's produced. The whole album is littered with these little moments that somebody had to fight for, and had to make the case for why does this need to be here? If we're all kind of rubbing against it, but why does this need to stay? And everybody has these little moments that were fought for, and hard fought and won. So it's fun listening through and catching those and remembering that that was something that we had to
call.
That was almost didn't make it. Now that when I hear the record, I can't imagine any of those pieces not being there.
I want to get a little background on you guys. And again, to reference the first track on this album, talking about maybe I'll get a 9-to-5 job. Either of you, have you ever done did you? Were you not that there's anything wrong with a 9-to-5, but when you're creative and you guys are artists, you just don't see it, but you did.
Absolutely. Well, we both did.
Both did.
I've had some very humbling jobs along the way, and there's in our history too, like we shelved the band for a minute in 2016 because we toured and toured and toured and toured, and it almost broke me and my marriage. And I had to take almost 3 years off to look after my mental health. And in that time, I wound up getting a couple of sort of straight jobs. At one point I was working, I did 6 months of lifting TVs in a warehouse for a while. That was very humbling, but also very necessary.
Yeah, clears the mind,
Yeah, just some good perspective, I think. Joey was famously a roti technician.
Yeah, one of the most valuable life lessons, I think, it's hard to say one of the most valuable, but my mom, when I was going into being a full-time musician and sort of like, she said to me, just don't be too proud to not pick up a day gig if you can't pay the rent. And there was a summer where the artists that I was working for they had reached a certain level of success, and they all at the same time kind of said, I think we're gonna take the summer off. I was like, ugh, how am I gonna pay my rent? So I went and worked at a Jamaican restaurant downtown Winnipeg that had live music, and I was working in the kitchen, and like the amount of times that people would come in, they go, oh, you're playing tonight? I'd be like, nope. I'm making rotis.
You mentioned your mom giving you advice, and obviously your father. For people who may not know your background, your father was a musician.
That's right. Yeah.
Was there ever a question growing up that this is the path that you guys would take?
It was for me, for sure. Like it wasn't
An absolute.
No, not at all. Like I came to it relatively, quite a bit later. Like Joey was sort of set on that path early. It was pretty clear that music was his calling, and that's what he was going to do. And it took me a little longer to get there. I still have moments where I question, what I do. I think the reality is most of us all suffer from some kind of imposter syndrome that makes us wonder what business we have, being up here doing the things that we do. I think that's just part of the reality of being an artist or a creative person for a living. When you're surrounded by so many incredibly talented folks all the time.
Instrument-wise, Joey, for you that, obviously I'm sure instruments were laying around the house, but it really was the harmonica, right, that you picked up where you go, dude, I can make some music on this.
Yeah. You did. Yeah, that's a real deep dive. Yeah, that was my first musical moment. I was always really enchanted by music, and obviously there's lots of music in our house growing up, and I would bang away on the piano but my mom actually captured the moment on camera. She just snapped a photo when I blew into a harmonica for the first time and a major chord came out and was like, oh, music, like actual music. And I'm still chasing after that feeling now.
That kid-like wonder.
Yeah. That's the sweet spot when you can find yourself in that total sense of overwhelming wonder. That's where cool stuff happens.
Not only your parents, but where you grew up. I know Manitoba is just a beautiful part of Canada. Talk about how that kind of affected and shaped who you guys are and who you are as artists.
I think more so the less about the geography or even anything like that. I think it's the community, and the musical community specifically in Winnipeg is really, really special. It's really unique, and as touring musicians, you get to parachute into all these different communities all over the world. You know, great music towns like New York or LA or Nashville and
London.
Yeah, sure. All these great places where artists flock and big congregations and make art. And there's something so special and unique about Winnipeg. And it may be influenced by the geography or it may be influenced by where we are on the map, that we're really isolated, that our winters are really long and unfathomably cold, especially to those of you who live in south here. But the scene is so deep and it's so collaborative and supportive, and there's no competition whatsoever. There's no cutthroat sort of attitudes towards making the music, because there's so much room for everybody to do what they want to do, because musicians can buy a home in Winnipeg, you know, which is really rare anywhere else. So it's a really special place. It really lifts people up, and especially now, you know, we've started a record label and a music company with our manager Stu, who's hanging out back here somewhere, and we've been able to sort of work with this new generation of artists that's coming up and like support some of them and get involved with what they're doing. And Joey's producing some records for these young guys. It's a really special thing that's going on down there. And that we were the benefactors of that scene coming up too in a really big way, had a lot of support.
Doesn't it solidify to you, and I'm going back to, Dave, what you had said, where you question things, but having the ability and that freedom and the lifestyle that it affords you where you're home, and to be able to pay it forward with your label birthday cake has to feel amazing.
It does,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's really special.
You had mentioned the break and, you know, with Let It Lie, of course, winning the Juno Award, and you guys hit it hard. A lot of people go, wow, winning the Juno Award, obviously, that felt great. Did you feel pressure? Was there a go, go, go kind of, we got to hit it hard?
Well, and we did. Yeah, we just kind of, like literally we won the award, and then we all got on a red-eye flight to Austin and went to Austin, for South by Southwest, and had our butts absolutely kicked. And
how so?
well, we just, you know, we went from this, you know, winning a prestigious award, it's like the highest sort of accolade you can get as a Canadian musician, to playing in a club where the house tech doesn't have you in the PA, and just really humbling stuff. But we chased that around as much as we could, and it was no regrets certainly, but it wore us down pretty hard, and we learned some tough lessons in that time.
I had read that you guys felt like the reunion, the Healing album was going to be 87, but you really feel like Come Morning is that for you guys.
Oh, yeah.
How so and why?
Well, when we made 87, we were coming off of the back of a hiatus without a clear plan. And I remember distinctly Joey and our manager, Stu, who was, you know, we talk about Murray as like the third creative Beatle, or he's like the fifth Beatle, I guess. Stu is kind of that to us too. He is as much a part of this family, and also doesn't get the limelight, but that's how it goes for managers. It's a tough gig.
It's a tough gig.
But anyways, I remember both of them sitting me down in that period and just being like, what is going on? And I was like, I don't know, but I know we need to make another record. So we went into this record, 87, being like, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to fire up this machine. We're going to get the bros are back. We're going to do it. But we don't know what that means. Like, are we touring again? Are we not? When is this record coming out? How is it coming out? What does it mean? Is this a one and done, or are we? And I didn't have any of those answers. I just felt compelled to do this thing, and these guys were like we want to do this. Show us the path. And I was like, I don't think I can answer it. So we launched into this thing without a real clear plan, and it wound up, it was the equivalent of just sweeping a bunch of stuff under the rug and moving forward. It's like we didn't address any of the stuff that was wrong. I wasn't able to show them that I was in a better place because I wasn't yet. I just I knew that I wanted to do it. I wanted to be there, but I wasn't there. And they were really patient, but we got out onto the road, and the record took over 2 years to make. Just, I think even longer, maybe 2.5 years. It was difficult. It was just a hard record to make because so much of this stuff was unsaid and it wasn't clear. And then when we hit the road, Joey was burnt out because he had just toured.
I've just done 4 years of touring on
your own.
my
He did
solo
solo.
stuff.
Yeah, Whiskey and then Hindsight, and hit it hard. And
Built a bunch of markets from scratch, just going out with me and an acoustic guitar. And yeah.
so by the time we got to 87, now we were kind of both in shambles. So when the pandemic hit, it was a chance for both of us to retreat and answer some of those really hard questions and start digging through this stuff. Why, like, what are we doing and why? Who are we? Are we healthy? If we're not healthy, what would we need to do to get healthy? Both of us spent a ton of time in therapy, working through a bunch of that stuff, working on our marriages.
Just a reset.
Yeah, in a big way.
Sort of reassessed what's important and what does that actually mean to us to be musicians and be artists and songwriters. And we had a lot of tough conversations and answered a lot of tough questions, and came into this era and this record with more purpose, more motivation, more enthusiasm than anything ever before.
I mentioned at the top of this interview that it's a lot about ending relationships, a lot about saying goodbyes, but overall there's some optimism, there's some hope, which of course everybody needs. Halfway through this record, I call it when we talk about reset, I kind of felt like it was a rebirth in a way, and it's the song After the Rain. I felt like maybe it was deliberate that it was halfway through the tracks on this record. Am I looking into it too? Am I being a Joey? Am I getting too deep on this?
No, I mean, I think we followed our gut so much on all the different sort of elements of this record, from the production to the performance to the track listing and things like that. So it may not have been an active conversation that hey, this is our moment to really have our
reset.
sunrise.
Yeah.
But it certainly was a decision made emotionally that was in response to what that tune represents, for sure.
I'm going to pull some of the lyrics out. After the rain, that sun will be shining, we'll be dancing like fools underneath silver linings. The rain can wash it all away. We're going to let it go.
Yeah.
It feels good.
Yeah, like when we wrote this song, this is a song we wrote with Jonathan Singleton, who is one of our favorite co-writers and is a Nashville local. And that was right early in the pandemic. And that is the only song that is really that directly influenced by what was going on at the time. And it was us trying to reconcile this feeling of like dread and hopelessness about what was happening in the world between Black Lives Matter and the pandemic and all this stuff that was just felt like this impossible weight while we were locked at home without being able to do anything. That song was our way of like putting this like little prayer into the world, be like, I hope this is all for something, and that when this is done, there will be a silver lining that will help make us feel like all of this suffering and heaviness has been worth something. And it wound up being kind of a thesis statement for the record inadvertently, and then. It's funny that you mentioned that sort of like the deliberateness of the track listing or things like that. So much about this record we're discovering after it's done.
Wow.
Like in the process of talking about it and exploring it and leaning into some of the lyrics, we're going, oh, that's what that's about. I didn't know that. Working from this place of like really trying to explore things, but a lot of the answers have been clear now in hindsight. Oh, that's why we wrote that. That's what that's really about. And that's been a really fun process. I've never experienced that with a record before that we've made. You know, it's like it's still revealing itself to us in some ways.
As you mentioned earlier, right? Perspectives change what it means today. You mentioned Jonathan Singleton, so I'm going to go off of that. Sure. There's a great song, and I call it the love letter. One of the love letters on this album is "What in the World Would I Do Without You?" Jonathan Singleton, for people who may not know, gosh, he's written songs for Gary Allan, Luke Holmes, David Nail, the Zach Brown Band. I mean, the list goes on and on. He's just one of those minds. Talk about being in the room, with you guys and getting the process in the song. Does it happen fast?
That one did.
With Jonathan,
Yeah.
things are pretty quick. He's such a unbelievably skilled writer. And the first time we wrote with him was back in 2014. And I remember, I'll never forget it. We sat down with him and he said, "What y'all want to write?" And I said, "I have this idea." It was a song off our last record. It's called Made Up Mind. And he looked at me and went, "So we're not writing country?" I was like, "Well, we're not really a country band. We're like a little bit of country band, but we're also like kind of," and he was like, "Great." And I think he knew in that moment, this whatever this song is gonna be, it's probably not gonna make me any money. but we just hit it off, and we're like musically pretty kindred, and we had a blast hanging out. And so when we got together and started writing for this record, it was I almost feel like I don't know why Jonathan still answers the phone when we call, but I honestly don't know why he still answers the phone when we call.
It works.
The songs we've written with Jonathan are some of my favorite songs ever. And he and I wrote a song for my first solo record that is probably one of my, like, sort of a fan favorite. And it just works. It's a great collaboration, and we enjoy each other's company, and these great songs come in. And we always jokingly say that every time we write with Jonathan, if songwriting could ever be a competition, he wins every time.
Yeah.
He's such a great writer.
Yeah.
Off the chart. You mentioned Made Up Mind, and of course that was on your first album. Mm-hmm. I know you guys are Bonnie Raitt fans. So when Bonnie Raitt covers the Brothers Landreth, that's got to feel good.
It's
Is it up there with the Juno Award?
it's
Is
so
it-
That is not a
Not a slam, no,
not a
by
slam
any
on the
means, but
Junos,
it's a big thing.
The thing that the way that we've been able to express that best is that we did not give ourselves permission to even dream that big when we started this band, or at any point in our career. Your mind doesn't even go to that place, that one of your absolute heroes. And we grew up on Bonnie Raitt. Like these are records that were in our house that influenced the way we play music. We would not be the band that we are today if it wasn't for her records and the way she plays, and her slide playing, and her singing, and her bands. So to find out that she's cutting one of our tracks, and that it was on that it made the record, that it was the lead single, that it's been on the radio for, I think there are like 10 consecutive weeks.
12, I think.
12 consecutive weeks in the top 1, 2, 3. It's just been such a trip. Wow. Such a trip. Like, we peaked early. We're basically
This is our retirement tour. So thank you very much for everything, folks. We're
nothing left
I'm
to
going
do.
back to landscaping and roti making, and Dave's great at lifting TVs.
52-inch plasma. I'll be right out with that.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. The Brothers Landreth. The name of the album is called Come Morning. I'm Suzanne Alexander for American Songwriter. And thanks to everybody here at Starstruck Studios in Nashville's Music Row.
Hey, we're the Brothers Landreth.
Be sure to subscribe to American Songwriter's YouTube channel.